Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, Danae, and I'm here with a message for you. Now, today, as promised, is the full moon message and reading. So, we're going to jump right into it. As always, the timestamps will be down below, either in the description box and/or in the comments, so you can move around as you feel guided. But without further ado, this is the full moon in Aquarius message. All right, so first, I didn't get to say happy Monday. It is August 19th, 2024, which is the day of the full moon. And that's happening around 2:17 or sometime a little after 2 Eastern time, which is probably around about that time now that I'm actually recording. But of course, as we know, the frequencies are just as progressively potent 3 days before and regressively so 3 days after. But today is the actual full moon. And not only is it full, it's a super blue moon. Okay, so a super full blue moon. And the last time there was a super blue moon in Aquarius, as it is today, was August 10th, 2014. Yes, you heard that right. 10 years ago. If that seems too long ago to remember, consider that the last super blue moon was in Pisces on August 30th, 2023, just a year ago, where we, by way of that Virgo-Pisces axis, were urged to usher our dreams into reality through the vehicle of belief. There is a deep connection between all of these lunations, certainly between 2014 and today, but you could probably surge all three if you're careful to do so. If you could think back to 2014 and what you were doing during that season, perhaps you would find that you were laying the groundwork for how you would grow throughout the decade to follow. It may be evident how that time frame molded you to become the person that you would have needed to be just last year around this time, to not only dream big, but to believe even bigger around that Pisces super blue moon, sorry. Nonetheless, here we are at yet another opportunity to envision the goals that will shape our future, perhaps for the next decade ahead, which could be the greatest benefit of remembering back to 2014. In true full moon form, now is a good time to reflect, take inventory, and consider points of release that may or may not align with who you desire to be, what you want to do and have moving forward. This point of release may be of your very own thoughts and opinions on the state of affairs in your life, and maybe even on a larger scale beyond yourself. This is the nudge from Aquarius, which is a sign of innovation, progress, and group efforts. You might find yourself on the front lines championing for a cause that deeply moves you. This is the lunation that would not only assist those efforts, but insist that you be the change that you wish to see. Now, as much as there is encouragement to reflect upon the past, that is mostly for the purpose of historical reference. Efforts must evolve to align with the time at hand and the optimal outcome in demand. We fight the hardest for what we truly believe in, which again, I suppose is the significance of considering where you may have planted and watered seeds back in August of 2023, maybe even throughout the entire summer season. A year later, there should be a harvest that could sustain your cause at this point, maybe even enough to share with others. That could be as practical as tangible material and resources, or even as information, i.e., your own personal testimony as a witness of what persistence and perseverance can yield in a year, let alone in a decade. You are living proof of pure passion, past and present. To apply all that you know now with faithful fortitude is all that bright futures are made of. So here's to having the next decade or more be mind-blowing in all the best ways possible. And that is the full moon, the super blue moon in Aquarius message for today. Happy blue moon to you. Happy full moon. If you're a journaler and you happen to have something to reflect upon, now is really a good time. I actually look back. Of course, I didn't have, well, unfortunately for me, but maybe you do have some written reflections from 2014. But even like I said, last year with the super blue moon that was in Pisces, it was a pretty big deal. And I did journal at that time. I think I had even shared, I'm pretty sure it was a message that I shared. And so I was able to reference that and really consider where my head was, where my energy was invested, what I was looking forward to, what I was manifesting at that time. And to now see, reflectively what that has yielded is enough if you can't think back to 2014. But me personally, I don't have recorded notes, but in my reflection, I realized how pivotal of a time 2014 was for me, because that was the time when I was in a program called Momentum Education, where at that time I was in the leadership program. There were 3 tiers. I had done beginners, I went on to the advanced, and then in August of that year, during which was the last super blue moon in Aquarius, I was kind of like in the thick of a leadership program that really kind of changed my entire energetic makeup. Like, it was a place where I discovered not only the parts of me that I had taken for granted, so I should say rediscovered, but in some ways rediscovered, and then in some ways discovering new aspects of myself that I had kind of taken for granted, suppressed, that I had just completely, been ignorant to, because a lot of times the best of you goes unappreciated because it's just so, it's just so common, it's been a part of you all your life that sometimes you don't really revere it to be anything special. But in that program of which I was in, it's more or less like a personal and professional advancement course that I did with not just by myself, but it was with like almost like a small class of folks, no more than 20. I can't remember off the top of my head how many of us there were, but it was definitely not more than like say 20 of us. And it was a really intimate setting where we were all on the same path, more or less, to enhance our own personal abilities, using a multitude of tools and resources and teachers as guides that, was almost like a class in real life, to kind of take inventory of how you've been doing life and how you've been showing up, and to, consider if this works for you, and if not, how you can make adjustments or enhancements that would bridge the gap between who it is that you say, who it is that you are, and who it is that you aspire to be, So it would be hard for me to really sum up that experience in this video or even in words, period, because it's one that I used to promote for free to my friends and family, you know, that if they would just get into the beginner's course, it would be life-changing. But then to go forward into advance and then leadership, where you're literally taking your life's goals, writing them down. So it was like really manifesting in real time, but with practical tools and spiritual, even though it wasn't proclaimed to be spiritual later, you know, I realized that they were kind of like spiritual, I don't know how you say it, but like spiritual applications in a sense, but in a practical way, if that makes sense. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, because clearly this video is not sponsored by Momentum Education, but they do have courses all throughout in New York, and all throughout other parts of the country, based in New York though, and that's where I was in 2014. I was in New York City. And again, in reflection, not only was I learning to expel and pronounce the very best of myself without apologies, I was also leveraging those qualities with others that were learning the same, which is all that this lunation is kind of like, like it's all is made up of, you know, with Aquarius being about the collective, but you kind of shining your light in a very revolutionary way as a part of the collective and championing for the best of the collective, but still doing it in your own way, you know, but with your own expression. That's exactly what I was learning back then, you know, and how my foundation was set to continue on in life. I would have had no idea, you know, the path that I was about to embark on in the next 10 years to follow, having to make some of the most pivotal choices and decisions of my life to date, and still upholding the best of the vision that a lot of which was created in that season, you know, never letting it falter no matter what detours or distractions or disturbances or interferences I may have encountered. It has done nothing but grow as I have grown in this decade of time. It's almost kind of like crazy to think that it's only been a decade, because I've grown so much throughout this time frame. So that's just my own personal testimony, that I could probably go more in depth with the time to do so, but I won't. But I'm only sharing that as an encouragement from a personal perspective, that who you were 10 years ago has probably, if you know, if you've been doing it righteously, you know, I won't say right, because everybody's path is different, but if you've been righteously, meaning like in integrity, committed to evolving yourself in spirit and in truth, you should have a great deal of reflection to look upon since 2014. And I'm not just speaking about material measurement. I'm talking about energetically, mentally, spiritually, you know, who you have grown to be from then to now is a true testament to who you are in this moment to now project the best of the next decade or more to come, because the stakes are much higher now in this moment than they were in 2014. If I had known that what I was establishing then would have so much weight, it's like one of those, like if you had known what you knew then type of energies, where we have a unique time, moment in time to kind of create that energy, where if you reflect on the past 10 years, it kind of does catch you up to knowing all that you need to know in this moment, gathering yourself wholly and completely to really make a firm stance on what it is that you insist to command of your life creatively from this point moving forward. You do have all of that knowledge from then to now. And of course, we can't control every twist and turn and, you know, road on the path and the road ahead, but you certainly have a much elevated, you should, you know, most likely have a much elevated outlook to project the best for yourself than you would have even 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, when I was taking a class, like, I knew it was changing my life, but I didn't know how so. You know, like, now I'm like, wow, if not for that pivotal moment in time, I probably wouldn't have had the tools or the energy to sustain throughout this 10-year cycle up until now. You know, like, I may not have made it to this point had I not made a very definite choice and decision to invest in myself at a professional, creative, and even emotional and energetic level then, of which, you know, nobody was forcing me to. It was something that I saw value in, something that was thankfully offered to me as an opportunity through a friend that I saw value in, and I saw that it could add value to who I was at that point. I just didn't know how projectively so it would. And here I am 10 years later, still sometimes gleaning from the experiences and the tools and the connections even that I had built back then, you know, now. So you can have that reflection too, that can be forwarding, and also grounding for what it is that you're building in real time and believing for, maybe even already stepping into in real time. You know, I don't know how it's going to relate to you personally, because, you know, everybody receives the past and the projection of it differently. But I know that if you allow yourself to contemplate, you'll find some value in it. So that's all that I'm saying, ultimately. And now is the moment of truth where, you know, it's all or nothing, pretty much. So you are not void of anything, considering all that you have invested in yourself over the past 10 years, great or small. You know, it's all valuable for how you get to ground in this moment and project for the next, let's say, year, but certainly this moment has the potency of projection for the next 10 years, maybe even the next 20, you know. So if you had known what you knew then in 2014 to know that you were building a platform for yourself for 10 years to follow, like solid ground, you know, consider that with, you know, at that time now having the mindset that you are, because back then I didn't know, but now I do know. So consider how much more intentional you get to be, knowing that the decisions that you're making in this moment are more than just for this time. They make an impact and an impression beyond, you know. So anyway, govern yourselves accordingly. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm sure you can catch my my stuffiness right now. I'm having a little bit of an ascension flu that I'm actually on top of now. Thankfully, it was good that I rested throughout this past weekend, because that's obviously what my body needed. So I'm a little stuffy, but I'm actually quite well. I'm okay. But if I need to stop and, you know, swab my nose a little bit for some clarity, forgive me, and forgive the stuffiness in my speech, and hopefully you just hear the message. But anyway, we're going to move on to the reading. Okay, so this is the full moon in Aquarius reading. Yeah, so I hope you're doing well. I don't think I really got to say that, as I kind of just jumped in, because I figured I would probably have a lot more to share outside of the message today. And I don't want this to be too long. You may notice the smoke in the frame. I do have incense burning. It's Sacred Sun incense, if you're wondering, by him. So I do have that element going for me now, thankfully. I always miss having incense in the house. To me, it's like the smell of prayer whenever I light one. But I also do have my timer going as well, because I kind of wanted to gauge like exactly how long my incense burned, more or less, compared to the hour that I set my timer for. So that may go off. I'm sure it will actually today before the end of the message. But nonetheless, if it's a little longer than usual, you know, just hang in there with me, all right? The moon message and reading usually is a little bit longer anyway. All right, so let's see what we got. Full card, the first card in the deck. Wow, starting at ground zero. Let me get a sip of water if you don't mind. Wow. Starting off at the beginning. And I would say that a great deal of this full moon, as I've said, like, it's not only the inventory of the last super blue moon, it's like a culminating lunation, given it also is a full moon that kind of is that anyway, like really bringing a cycle to its proper close so that you can start fresh. Again, knowing what you know now, perhaps in some ways forgetting a lot of what you have known that you can take inventory is not going to be useful moving forward. I didn't speak on that, but that is a thing as well, that there's a great deal of information and by way of our experiences that is valuable to carry over, but there's also some things that we may need to unlearn, you know, or that we have had to unlearn or had to dispel over the past 10 years, and now we get to like completely leave that baggage behind. You know, the Fool is about moving forward, packing light, you know, like not carrying a great deal of burden, baggage, anxiety, eagerness. You know, you're moving in faith with all that you need in tow. Not all the justing, you know, like when you pack for a trip and you pack hella extra stuff, like just in case, you know what I mean? Like you're pretty sure that you're probably not going to wear half of the stuff or at least a portion of the things, but just in case, you never know, you overload your suitcase. The Fool's not that energy. The Fool is like a practical packer, you know, very almost survival driven to an extent, like taking all that you can foresee yourself to need at least, you know what I mean? Like not at most, but at least, like the necessities, what would fortify you in an emergency, you know what I mean? Even in terms of information, as I said, not carrying too much weight of the past, of, you know, of what you can remember, or even what your muscle memory might transport. You know, the forgiveness is certainly key in this transitional lunation, to not allow yourself to carry too much of maybe what didn't go right, or what was a disappointment, or who was a disappointment from the past, but really just treating this cycle as something altogether new. You know, that's a gift. Honestly, it's a gift, and the transit is helping us to support that, but we also must be in agreement with that invitation. Certainly the moon doesn't do anything for you per se, it just creates the experiences of which we, the current, the tide of sorts of which we can either flow with or swim against, so the Fool card is someone that's kind of like going with the flow, even to the degree of moments when, it might be a little bit, might be a little bit dangerous. Like he's at the edge of a cliff here. Yeah, what the dog is like, hey, this is the end. This is the end of the road. It's like, depending on the motivation behind this transition, it's either in faith or in fear. You either have enough stocked up energy to know that no matter what it appears to be, your steps are ordered and therefore are aligned securely, or, you haven't stocked up enough in that little knapsack of experience to know, or at least didn't take all the right things with you, all the right memories to consider that every time you may have come to an end of a cliff, you always seem to be caught. You always seem to have a segue of safe passage. It's either one, and so therefore you could falter to your demise in fear, or you could flourish in faith. And then here is, look at this. Here's the energy back here that would want to almost remind you, like, the last time you came to the edge of that cliff, you fell flat on your face. Would want to project to you all the reasons why you should cower in fear, maybe be afraid to take that leap of faith, or be afraid of what lies ahead in the journey forward. Maybe even be insecure about your preparation, or your competency to face whatever is next. But then here you are with the Six of Wands. It's like where these projections might mean to meet you at a less secure state of being, i.e. back in the you of 10 years ago, where you were just doing stuff that you hoped was adding value, but not really having the evidence to see how much so. And then here you, like, this is the energy that would want to meet you at that point, when you're less secure, less stable, more susceptible to being distracted, maybe even defeated, to keep you from reaching the edge of that cliff before you even approach it, again, in fear. The you now is the one that has taken this path, has faced every obstacle along the way, every interference, every enemy, found your way around every detour. And this is the importance of really reflecting on who you've transformed to be, because energetically speaking, no pentacles present, meaning it's not necessarily about material measurement or evidence. This is about who you are in the face of challenge, maybe even in adversity, maybe in the face of fear, maybe in the face of a challenge, or how even your faith has grown on account of your challenges. The evidence shows that you always find your way to victory. You always find your way on the top of that challenge, or at least on the outside of it, and having become better and stronger than you were when you went in. Even as you live above the fray, of society, of which sometimes can be a challenge itself, you always find it to be satisfying in a way that would, in ways that would ultimately encourage you to keep going on that in that vein. You know, not to cower back into the conditioning of what is societally acceptable or what the resistance would like to scare you back into a comfort zone or a pocket or a conformity that is more palatable for, you know, for the masses, or more controllable by the forces that would want to, you know. This Six of Wands is like still championing for the path that is righteous to you, and finding little signposts and signals all along that way that would ultimately tell you, like, yeah, you're going the right, look at this, you're going in the right direction, and that advance you even in accelerated ways to the point where you have no, where it's irrefutable. And honestly, I'm seeing this as what's happening in the present moment, or what is getting ready to occur, where how you have engaged the challenges of the past and kind of like kept your energy fresh and as uncorrupted as possible is what has opened the roadway for an accelerated advancement here at the Eight of Wands, where now spirit and flesh converge with all the efforts, you know, all the energy that you've already invested, now colluding with or colliding with maybe even spirit's advancement, you know, like that supernatural wind of change that is bringing all things into order, you know, almost fast forwarding it on the timeline that it deserves to be on, if not for the great interferences and detours and roadblocks that one may have incurred. I guess that's what the Bible kind of means when it says, like, it'll make up for the time that was lost, you know, like maybe even the harvest that was consumed by the locust. There's a scripture, something about that, about making up for lost time and things that you thought you left behind or lost in the transition. It's like everything manifests, oh wow, in just the right season, as it is destined to, and almost leaving nothing behind. Like everything converges in the present moment, or which now would be the future moment of what you projected and where you thought you would be coming into this moment void of some things. It turns out that everything that you would desire to have had from that projective point of the past meets you right where you are. I don't even know if that makes sense, but that's just how I'm saying it. So catch it how you will. If I feel something on that, but I don't know if I'm expressing it the best. We are still in Mercury retrograde after all. So bear with me. Yeah, but then we got this Magician card, which is kind of like speaking to what I'm saying. It's like the acceleration from the past through the present. Something about the future here too, though. Like the work that you put in, the groundwork that you laid in those past experiences. It's something about how it has groomed you in this present moment to be receptive of okay, how can I explain this? Because this Magician to me is like speaking something about future projections, like what you may have professed, pronounced, proclaimed back when you didn't even really know no better. You know what I mean? Like, let's consider, like I said, 10 years ago, when you were just doing what what felt right, and the full energy, almost naive and to some degree. Even if you thought you knew, you couldn't have known, not when you reflect on how it all panned out a decade later. But there were still certain projections that you made, even during that time, having much less intelligence, meaning knowledge, not like aptitude, but like much less intelligence and foresight then. Whatever it is that you proclaimed and decreed at that point already existed in a time and place ahead of you, right? But there was something about having to almost like catch up from, like, again, that place of less intelligence, then having to catch up, perhaps even now, with who you got to become in order to actually have those projections align with you, like the becoming. And that's one of the points that I didn't say in terms of my reflection about my time in momentum education. The most pivotal ideal that I learned throughout that program, and not just learning it, but learning how to activate it and move in that frequency, was the ideal of be, do, have. And the order, that being the correct order of things, no matter how you splice it in life. A lot of, at that time, what I realized after becoming acquainted with that term, that ideal, is that I focused much more on the doing to have than I really focused on the foundation, which was who did I need to be first and foremost to have a result. And then the convergence between those two is what actions are emulated from the being of my identity. Like what actions follow who I get to be first and foremost. Because there's a direct flow between all three of those. And you can't have the end before the beginning. And you can't even have the middle, because you could find yourself doing a lot of things that seem like the right thing to do, even in the ways that, I was engaging myself in the momentum program, and I was heavily involved in church and stuff at that time as well, of which none of it I regret. It was all important, but I wasn't really connected to my profession of identity at that time as much as I was to the things that I felt I needed to do in order to almost find an identity, like to solidify one, not really connecting to who I already was to be looking in the first place, to be doing in the first place. I was enlightened, and so I was engaging in activities that I was enlightened and awakened at that time. That was the beginning of my spiritual awakening in a lot of ways. Even a couple years before that, where I started reading a lot more like self-improvement books and things like that, like Think and Grow Rich, and calling in, what was that book? Think and Grow Rich. It was like Millionaire Messenger, very The Secret-esque type of energy is what I was starting to ingest, but again, very much so in the doing, very much so in the acquisition of more knowledge, not really grounded in the idea that I was already enlightened enough to be activated in that frequency, and much of what I was searching for, I already embodied. If I would have just sat down and kind of like listened to myself, I felt like I needed to gain more knowledge, gain more experience, connect with enlightened people, again, more in the doing. So all that to say is that in my naive ambitions to some degree, well, I'll say bright-eyed ambitions, because it wasn't really naive. I just didn't have all the information and tools yet, which is to my point here. But there were certain projections that I was making even in those efforts before I even realized, as the full energy does or doesn't, who I was already, who my identity at its most authentic, in its most authentic nature, which was someone that is already enlightened, and which is why I'm always in the market for more enlightenment, because I realize you can never be too much so, but I didn't have the self-awareness to appreciate myself at that level as much as I had the ambition to do the things that would reflect back to me what I already was, if this is making sense. So again, like like I said, the professions that I was making of even my creative professional identity, back then I was calling myself like the virtual personal stylist, before people were even really like in the virtual realm holistically, where people didn't even, when people didn't really even truly grasp the concept of how such a more personal and hands-on service could possibly be transmitted to something more virtual. Now, not long after is when Stitch Fix came along, you know what I mean? So all that to say is like certain things that I was grounded in and just kind of doing the actions of to have a certain outcome, which at that point, was certainly a material return and advancement in some type of way. What I caught up with, or what caught up with me, whichever way, is that identity, the pure essence of that passion that I had already pronounced way back then. Here at this middle ground, this present moment now, and throughout that time frame, is when it's almost like I had backtracked and retrieved my identity that would be the ultimate foundation for what I was already doing. But it was the identity, the self-awareness, the knowing that I needed to ground in order to be in a receptive place for the advancement forward in that identity, doing the things, even more efficiently that I was already doing. And also, here it is, at the magician level, receiving the rewards and the returns of what was already projected. I hope that makes sense. But it comes down to, centrally me choosing, coming to this middle, this centric point of choosing to commit to the most supreme self that I could aspire to. Like this is what, before it was like I was doing all the things that kind of, looked like it, but to have to take a step back and actually consider, who am I? What does my life reflect back to me in terms of identity, and what do I truly align with, or what's the right word? What do I assert even more so? Because there's one thing of what the world reflects to you as to who you are, but What is it that you're in alignment with or in agreement with? And then how is it that you truly assert that truth? Because what I found is that a lot of the ways of which I was doing the things were not connected to the most organic nature of my being. Once I got down to it, I realized that a lot of the things that I was doing were because of the conditioning of which I felt reflected the identity I was aspiring to. That if you want to be enlightened, you read high vibrational materials. If you want to be creatively, or you want to be like a sovereign spirit, then you create an avenue to kind of be your own boss, or to be, a creative professional in a sense, or professional in a way that's connected to your purpose. But what is that even truly if it's not holistically founded on your identity first, So first taking the moment to aspire to being my most supreme, just in raw, like naked truth form. And that means examining all aspects of me, dark and light, finding understanding and acceptance for all of those qualities, and then asserting those energies just as they are purely before I start to pack on anything else, That's what needed to catch up mentally, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, before I could truly be in the position to receive the manifestations that I had been calling into existence back when I barely knew who I really was. I hope that makes sense, because that's what's happening now. Like this, it's happening for me. I'm sure it's happening for you in some capacity, and it's a beautiful sight to behold. But I think it's important, as even the message denotes, to really take inventory of how you got to this place, because this is the knowing all you know now from back then moment that gets to follow you forward. It's for you to kind of see yourself, like your evolution, in a snapshot, so to speak, of how that got to be. Knowing, seeing in hindsight your potential, your voids, where you were misled, misguided, where you overcame adversity, where your intelligence expanded, evolved, where your confidence grew, and how so, and what tools were valuable, what things weren't, what things you had to release in that time frame, and what things added value, people, places, or things added value. Like, you have the culmination to know, like, who you are at this supreme manifestation force here as a magician. You're to have every trick in your bag be highly functional and efficient. Like, there's nothing more really that you need to collect of yourself that wouldn't already equip you to pretty much project not just what carries in from what's being, what's being harvested from the past 10 years, but how that gets to then be magnified and also does become magnetized for more. I feel like I could say that better, but I'm gonna move on. So I'm spending a lot of time here. But let's see what else we got. But if you get into the pictures, though, look, here's a 10 of Pentacles. But if you get into the pictures, like, it's so clear to me of what I'm saying. the Six of Wands energy being you moving beyond the adversity, even when you didn't even know you had adversity at times, and now being advanced to catch up with what was perhaps resisted or held back at a time, but for good reason, if we're saying it the way, if it makes sense the way that I'm saying it, because like I said, even for me, personal testimony, if I had had everything that I was proclaiming and professing be true back at this full stage, when I barely really had a full grasp on how powerful I truly was, it would have been a shit show. Like, I wouldn't have been able to really hold the responsibility, carry like the responsibility, the rewards, the magnitude, I wouldn't have been ready. It's just as simple as that. I wouldn't have been ready. I wasn't clear enough about even how deserving I was to have the audacity to envision such a future then, to actually receive it. A lot of it in hindsight, it just, in the spirit that I was in at the time, just looked good and sound good and made sense. And it obviously it all comes to light that it was all aligned, because it's manifesting in real time in a way that is sustainable, and where I am in a position to receive it and maintain it and even magnify it and multiply it, as evident here with the Ten of Pentacles. But if you had given me this Ten of Pentacles back at my full energy, I'd probably be down to 2 by now, for lack of wisdom, of true identity, of certainty in identity, of affirmation in my identity, the full range of responsibility to manage such a fortune and a fate. Just knowledge alone, like having learned so much about the things that I envisioned then that have completely reshaped my agenda and ambition for it now, that I would have been working much harder back then to maintain a fraction of the vision that I now perceive to work much smarter for, if that makes sense. So it's like, look, and then judgment underneath, it's like all aligned, it's all aligned. But the point of it now is really recognizing that alignment, you within it, to really assert that power at this point, because now the training wheels can come off. They should be off at this point, for you to, be affirmed in how you pedal along in the next leg of this path, but now with much more to be accountable and responsible for. Maybe even many more people, much more resources, much more, much greater of an impact to make. Back then it was pretty much just you. That 2014, I didn't even have a child yet. It was just me. I could move around New York City as I pleased, and let adventure carry me wherever my feet would guide. You know what I mean? And loved every minute of it. But now I have a legacy. I was already building the framework for the foundation of that legacy then, but now it's materialized in such a way where my choices, my decisions, my discernment has to be that much more intentional to protect what I have cultivated up until this point, and also to secure what more is in store. So I don't know, maybe this is just affirmation that you've done it. I don't know. I don't even know. And that almost came up in the struggle, this Five of Wands, but like you're beyond the competition at this point. There's no competition where there's no comparison. And energies that have focused a great deal of their time on how they could keep you back or keep you distracted or misinformed, misaligned. You know, it's like I said, a lot of times where people were observing, thinking that, you know, maybe even considering how their impact was gratifying their own cause, they didn't even really understand that it was all divine, you know, that even the ways in which you may have veered off onto some detour or some scenic route still was necessary to bring you to this present moment here, back to what I said, where nothing is missed. There's nothing lost, not time, not energy, not resources. Everything that's supposed to meet you at this moment of manifestation is righteously doing so. That means the things that have fallen away were not supposed to match up or catch up anyway. So they don't even really matter, unfortunately. You know, it sounds, yeah, exactly, the Ace of Pentacles. It sounds kind of like callous, but it's the truth of the matter. Like, we're after divine harvest here. That infinite seed that continues to grow, that has no limitation, that's not fleeting, you know, that's not here today, gone tomorrow, or like sand in your hands. Like, this is for eternal life, you know, or you know, if that seems too lofty of a spiritual or religious term, it's about your energy being expressed and expelled in a way that lasts beyond you, whether it be for the family the legacy that you're building and leading now, or as a mark of inspiration for those that come behind you, even what blood related or not. You know, like, everything matters that deeply now. It always has, but we didn't really know that it was. So it's kind of like, you know, ignorance is bliss in that regard. And, you know, it's like, woohoo, I'm just trying to be enlightened on this spiritual path type of energy. And now it's like there's much less of a grace period, so to speak, for faulty decision making when you know better now. You have all of the intel, you have the reflection, you have the inventory, you have the evidence, literally the evidence, the materialization of what works and what doesn't, and also seeing the advancement as it's coming. You know, this is a big opportunity for advancement here, you know, maybe even a big investment coming your way that, as I said before, is even more of a pronunciation that you're on the right track, you're on the right path. So to defer to anything that is like completely misaligned at this point, that could even be as practically as putting yourself in competitive arenas that don't yield you anything, like comparing yourself to other people's journeys, or, you know, comparing your harvest one to another, or allowing yourself to be distracted by those that insist on competing with you. It's just like, it's a complete waste of time and energy. And that could be in judgment, that could be action, that could be criticism, that could be gossip, you know, like it could be any range of things that could want to present themselves as a deterrent on your path to prosperity, that have already more or less defeated themselves if you allow them to. Now, if you allow them access to your path as if they belong there, then, you know, that's your prerogative. But if you kind of leave it to its own devices and keep on this Six of Wands energy, always looking ahead to how you can progress, the winds of change in the spiritual form and the Eight of Wands will always carry you far beyond your competition could ever even project to catch up. All right, we're not doing too bad. Let me just get 3 more and then I'm out. I know I did a lot of talking on these cards, but there was something that I felt I needed to work out. Judgment card is out again. Strong decision making, void of illusions and delusions. This is the energy that I probably would even flip-flop this. You know, I honestly could, because this one was on top, but either way, it's about staying in a righteous state of judgment, you know, monitoring, being responsible for your own actions, your own decisions, like allowing them to hold the weight, not to be scary or to be, you know, anxious or eager about, well, am I doing this right? Am I going the right way? Like, you've already gained the trust of the divine that would affirm your discernment up until this point, because you had much less intel and information to go off, and you still managed to make it to a very favorable point, you know, where the divine trusts you even with your inheritance, spiritual or material. Even with the big coin, with the Ace of Pentacles, like, you've gained the trust of the universe. This 7 of Cups is just, you know, staying clear of the illusions that could persist, because that's what they're, you know, that's all they know to do, pretty much. But what supersedes that is divine discernment at this point. You've already proven yourself to embody that. So with all that you know now, there could be nothing that could really trick you out of your most supreme manifestation force, because at this point you've kind of seen it all, and you've even seen beyond the veil. So nothing could put you in a position to so-called be stuck. And even if you are in the market for enlightenment, you just call it in. You know, even if there is a moment where there's uncertainty or insecurity, you have enough knowledge of who you are and what your privileges are in spirit and in truth to know that at any given time you need to call in some enlightenment. It's at your beck and call. Period. So you never need to go without, as long as you can go within. Shout out to Mystic Tori, who actually says go within so that you never go without. All right, one more here. And also, like, it's not even a bad thing to always be in the open-hearted posture for enlightenment, always being teachable, always being ready to learn, to advance your aptitude, to increase your intelligence spiritually or otherwise. That's what kind of keeps these illusions and delusions at bay, to the point where you don't feel like you aren't, you know, you can't be taught, or you're a know-it-all, or that you've arrived at the absolute point of ascension, you know, as if there's not always going to be more to aspire to. This place, you know, inherently of knowledge seeking and soul searching is not a bad place to be, because you'll either find the answers within, most likely, or you'll be in such an open posture to receive the signs and synchronicities from the outside, looking from the outside in, that you need to feel secure with, or I should say, in whatever way will guide you forward most favorably. Again, beyond the veil, beyond the illusions, beyond the delusions, there is no haze. There is no mystique that you can't pierce, not within and not without. Life is more or less an open book at this point in time. If it's not in regards to what you've already encountered, it's in regards to what you can search your soul for the answers for. One more. Six of Pentacles. And it becomes a community affair. Definitely giving way to the part of my message when I said, you, at this point, you have harvest enough to share with others. And by that, I meant, like I said, it could be resources, as in from the Ten of Pentacles, where there's more than enough to go around responsibly, at your will and your discernment, but also just an experience, your information, how you came to be the manifester that you are, how you have evolved to be in this bold space of security, to be magnetized in a way where things come to you, again, where you're working much smarter than you are hard at this point. That's a testimony worth sharing. You are a testament on display for others to see, and more or less to be inspired to come out of their despair or come out of their insecurities about their own potential, and that's what it ultimately gets to be universally. That's the point of it all, for us to kind of mirror each other's potential to one another, not to be copycats or, not to ignite jealousy or envy or competition or anything of that sort, but just to inspire, inspire creativity. And that's the Six of Pentacles. You have more than enough value right now. If you don't have a dime to your name, you have more than enough value in your testimony over the past year, and perhaps even over the past 10 years, that would help someone see themselves out of perhaps a disparaging reality, out of the illusion of it at that. That's the key. Because it's all projection, of which once upon a time you had to break free from. But, like I said, not knowing very much, but having the energy and perhaps the support system to do so at the will of your initiation, to invest in that part of yourself, is where the accompaniment of the spirit resources were able to align, right? But still not knowing very much, not being much different than the energetic exchange here is the Six of Pentacles, needing some support, some assistance, some affirmation, some confirmation. And you got it. Now you get to be it. You get to help others see their way out of that fog, out of that illusion and that delusion that projects to us a very limited path to prosperity from the outside in, more so than it is from the inside out, by the way of doing, and even more so acquiring, that would ultimately project to us the value of our identity, our worth. You know the way from the inside out because you've taken it. Most likely, if you can relate to this message, you've taken the road less traveled, and you have a great story to tell and a great success to exemplify. And that's all the gift to creation that you need to be in order for it to ultimately be a gift to us all, to advance the collective to higher heights, where we'll eventually get to eliminate this frequency here altogether. This competition, chaos, confusion, insecurity, combativeness, like all of the things that we would have wished we had less of on our path. Well, we get to curb that for the legacies that we lead and for the generations to come. Thank God. Two of Pentacles. Yeah, so they're curb that for the generations to come, put an end to it, as a matter of fact. So there's much less of a struggle here. And this could, again, in resource and time and energy, like what, consider if you can shave, 10 years is a long time, but it's not a lot of time. But it's a long time if you consider it. So consider having taken a 10-year scenic route to a lesson that maybe could have taken you 2, maybe 3, but 2, because I'm looking at the Two of Pentacles. Now for us, for me at least, maybe that whole 10-year span was necessary so that I could have the tools and the knowledge and the wisdom to pass down to my legacy that would ultimately shave that time off. Perhaps. And perhaps for him even more so. Maybe his 2 years will be shaved down to a couple months for his children or whatever. But the point of it is that imagine if you had had that privilege of what a generation before you could have shaved off of your learning curve, which unfortunately, especially for my generation, just was not so. Because for me and my age group, a lot of what we had to overcome was on account of what we were carrying from our predecessors, having to transmute and repurpose what we had already acquired for ourselves, and also having to kind of project toward the future to make it better for those coming after us, i.e. our children. So we had a big gap to fill. But thankfully, if we've done it well, and hopefully many of us have, it will put an end to this exasperated struggle of which, for many of us, we've been conditioned to believe was necessary, but futuristically may prove to really not be much so, at least not for where we're headed. So thankfully for all of us that put in the time and the struggle and the blood, sweat, and tears to get us to this present moment. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that this is the energy that gets to be released and left behind. That what was a struggle, what was a challenge, was so with purpose, but it doesn't have to be the mentality or the frequency of energy that we carry forward as if that's the only way it gets to be done. Now we're clearing the pathways literally from the inside out for more of an easeful existence, of which probably, was always meant to be, but was hard to foresee through our conditioning of what it should take to do the things that were required to have that outcome of ease. But now, knowing what we know that doing and having comes from our being, and the work has already been done. So we can be in the energy of ease, and again, working smart and not hard, and being in the spirit of expectation where we already are grounded in the identity of our worthiness to receive whatever we project, then that's half the labor right there. So that turns that frequency on its head of what hard work and reward, the equation between hard work and rewards. How hard are you working exactly? We get to dispel the illusions and the myths that kept us on a cycle, more or less karmically, of overexerting ourselves, and now transition into this new era of identity where we're living life, you know, easefully. And there was something I wanted to say, like, life is not happening to us, it's happening through us, and even for us to some extent. I hope that makes sense, but I feel like there's something powerful here about this being the Ten of Wands, the burdens that we willingly release and lay to rest, and this even being a cycle of continuation itself. Like, what is it that we want to reinsert into this, you know, or how we reinsert ourselves into this cycle of struggle or carry it on with us. The Fool card here is saying that you get to pack light, leave all this behind. Scarcity and struggle does not have to be a part of the story that you are projecting out from this point on. It can be something far more prosperous and far more productive and satisfying than what we have known it to be, and what we even may have evidence for of the past. This is something new. So now, knowing all that you've known, you know, would it really take you 10 years, another 10 years, to get to the reality that life is not supposed to be that hard? Would it take you that long? A lot of what we had to overcome was just the mentality that it is supposed to be that hard, because it was that hard for our parents and our parents' parents and so forth and so far back. But when you break that illusion and submit yourself to a new reality, you don't then carry that burden on with you into that new creation of life. You leave it right where it was, where it had value, but where the buck stops. Because now you know better than what you knew before. Because you are better than you've ever been before. I believe that, or you wouldn't still be listening at this point. All right, so anyway, thank you for listening and watching. Happy super blue moon to you. Enjoy the frequency of this energy in all the ways that you see fit to do so. Don't forget to reflect and reverence your evolution for all that it truly is in this present moment. And there's so much more in store. So get excited. All right, until next time, as always, I'll leave you with peace.